Hey people, so welcome back to the Harmony course here on Production Music Live, and now we're going to get a little bit more practical. We've had in the previous chapters, we've had scales, intervals, triads, different kind of chords, and now I want to go into a more practical session with you, how to actually write chords. I think that's a very philosophical question, and I think it's not that easy to answer it actually, because we have so many possibilities to write chords and to play chords. But first of all, I want to give you a small idea, which I think is great if you are writing chords, and I think it provides information that can make it easier for you to get certain about and to really know what you want to do. So what is that idea? So what are those thoughts that I have? Those thoughts are, what's the story you want to tell? Is there a story that's in your mind? And you can imagine, like the tonic chord that we talked about in our scale in C major. So I just want to open up the virtual keyboard here once more. So the tonic chord, right? Our C major chord is the one that feels most as home to us. So the first chord you're going to start your loop with, this is going to be your home chord, okay? And especially if you're writing your music in a major scale and you're starting on a C major, this will really feel strongly at home at this chord, right? Cool. So if you imagine a story or something, so now you're at home and then the actor or the actress is just walking away and going on an adventure. And this is how I would like you to see chord progressions more, it's a little analogy. It's a story that gets told. And so for example, if we move away from our tonic chord, we can do it in different ways. We can move to our fifth chord, which is pretty far apart from our root chord or our tonic chord, right? Because it has three completely different notes inside itself. And not only that, also the leading tone, the seventh, the major seventh, is inside the dominant chord. And this really feels like it wants to go home back. I hope you can hear this tension that it's creating, okay? Listen again. Okay, so if I just play 5 and 1. Okay, one more time. Now we feel as if we're coming home. So this principle of tension and release is very, very important if you want to write chords, okay? So now it's totally up to you how long your story should be, how far apart you want to go from your tonic chord, and if the story wants to be a little bit more of a positive story, or if it's a little bit of a pessimistic story, or maybe not even pessimistic, but a beautiful and nostalgic story, a melancholy story. So for example, if I say, okay, I'm home, I'm in a C major here, and now I want to say something that is closely related, so I don't want to move too far apart from my C major home, but I wanted a slightly more nostalgic feel to it. You can watch the notes that are inside your chord, which is C, E, G in this case, and what's the closest related minor chord to that? It's A minor. It's the relative minor of our C major chord. So there would be a possibility to not move too far apart in a minor chord, for example, in C major, like D minor, which has no common notes with C major, but to move to the A minor. So let's do that. Have a listen. And another thing is, how many chords do you want to put into your progression? So there are, in the end, endless possibilities, but I would say for music production and for popish or for electronic music, we only use 2 chords, so it's just C major, A minor, C major, A minor, and so on. So we can loop 2 chords, Or we can do a 3-chord loop, and with the 3 chords, it's important that you have to double one chord to fit the length of 4 bars, right? So if we have a look here, let's just loop 4 bars for a moment. We have 4 bars and we have to fit in 3 chords. So how do we do it? It's impossible because 3 is not fitting into 4. So what we have to do is we have to double a chord. So for example, you can start, let's just create a MIDI clip by hitting Shift Command and M. Let's start on the C major, very standard, and let's just duplicate this one over and over again. So we can move from our C major to whatever. Let's do the minor. Let's do the minor story here. So now we're A minor, and now we can go, for example, to F major, which is the subdominant of our C major chord. So if we go to the F major, we just have to transpose those 2 notes. And now we are here in F major, and then we're going back to C major, and then after this C major there is another C major coming. So this is how you write music with 3 chords. You just loop one of those 3 chords 2 times in your 4-bar loop, and then you have 4 bars filled out with your chords. Alright, so let's have a listen to this. You could even like drag this end here, and just double the length of this chord. I don't know if it's sustaining long enough, but so with a metronome. And this can be pretty interesting because if you end and if you start on the same chord, I think it's something very unexpected, and you're not changing on every first bar. So another thing that I want to mention is like in this harmony courses, like with a piano, it really sounds like a small child trying to play the piano, okay? That is because we're starting our chords on every first beat, on our on beat of our bars, and that's super like standard, and you only know it, from kids trying to play the piano. So I think there's a lot, we need to do abstraction work here in our mind, and we will have this chapter a little bit later, but you can use the notes inside of your chords and you don't place them on the one, and maybe different instruments are playing those notes, and then you have a melody, or you have some kind of a, more background harmonic loops that are complementing those chords, and then it does not sound so childish and so like stupid and unprofessional anymore. But this is just, we're doing the sake for just that you understand the harmonic approach, and this is best shown with a piano. Cool. So 4 chords is of course pretty obvious. You will just have to, hit 4 chords after every bar, or I mean, you can even wait, and you can also pull the start of a chord somewhere else. So a rhythmical variation and all that stuff is also something we're going to be talking about later on. So let's get back to our how do we actually write chord story, okay? So I like this concept of you're starting somewhere and now you have to think about how far apart from that sound do you want to go, or do you want to stay in the same mood but want to get a little bit more minorish or majorish, okay? And then you are looking inside your scale for a major or a minor chord that is near your current chord, okay? So if you want to stay close to it, if you don't want to make too much movement, you want to make slight changes, you should pick a chord that has a lot of similar notes inside. That's very obvious actually, but I didn't realize it for a long time. Okay, if you want to make a more drastic change, there you go. You just pick in the best case, you're in an A minor, so you're in a minor feel, you have an A minor chord, and then you go to a major chord that has no similar notes to that minor chord you were in. Then you're making one of the biggest changes, Of course, all inside of your diatonic scale. Let's go into Ableton, let's draw in all of our C major chords, our diatonic C major chords, and then let's see where there are similarities between the chords and where chords are very different from each other. So let's just create a MIDI clip here. Go to scale, enable C major, it's the default one. It's perfect. Let's open this up a little bit more. No. Fast forward, I will just type in all of our diatonic C major chords here. Alright, here we go. So now we have all of our C major diatonic chords. Okay, so what we're trying to do is now we don't want them stepwise because then we cannot really see which notes are the same in which chord. So I'm trying to transpose every note down so that they are like kind of fit into one square or one area together. So fast forward. Okay, so now I've transposed everything down and now we have some different inversions. All of our notes are more on one line and not having this kind of a pyramid upgoing motion. Okay, so what are we looking for now? Now we're looking for chords that have the same notes inside, okay? And what directly pops into my mind is if I'm in C major and I change one note, what chord could that be if not C major? So if I change the C to the B, we'll get an E minor chord, right? So E minor, which is here, can go to this position here. Okay, so now we can see that there's a close relation between a C major chord and an E minor chord because they have two similar notes. So this could be a good chord that you can use either to substitute the C major chord. So if you're having a chord progression and you don't want to play C major twice, you can use the E minor chord to substitute that. So another chord that is pretty similar to our C major chord is our A minor chord. We can find that one here. So let's just open this up a little bit more so I can have more space. Okay, so now you can really see the relationship here between our C major chord, our E minor chord, and our A minor chord, right? And I think this is something pretty interesting because now you can get a sense of how all those chords are working together, you know. Okay, so let's continue. So now we know that C major is closely related to A minor and E minor. So what chord is E minor related to? So if I have a look at E minor, I'm directly thinking of G major because we have this G inside, which is the root note of G major, and we have our B, which is the third of the G major chord. The only note we have to change if we want to achieve a G major chord is the E, and this has to get the fifth position of the G major chord, which is the D. Alright, so let's just move this to the right, expand our loop a little bit, and where is our G? It's here. Cool. So as you can see, if we move this here, we have two common notes here with our E minor. So now you can already see how you could progress very smoothly if you want to progress smoothly through your progression from your C major to your E minor and then to the G major or G dominant, however you want to call it. It's a dominant because it's the fifth position in our C major scale. So this would already lead back to our C major pretty well here. Okay, so we can just have a listen how this sounds. So now let's just decrease the tempo a little. So now you can see it's progressing very, very smoothly. Okay, so this is not even a real chord progression. This is just so that you can see what common notes are in which chords. Okay, so let's continue. Now we are in our G major, and now the next chord I'm thinking of is the B diminished chord, which is this one here. As you can see, we have two common notes here and one note that is making a jump of one whole tone. Alright, so now we can continue and we can already see that this is working out pretty nicely here. There is our D minor chord, which is kind of closely related to our B diminished chord because it has two common notes with it, right? So the next chord, we can look at our D minor chord. So what's left here would be this F major chord here. So if we just transpose this note down here, you can already see that we have two common notes here between our D minor chord and our F major chord. The next thing would be our C major chord, which we already implemented in the beginning. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 chords, and then we're starting over again at the C actually. So we could also just take this A minor chord here, and you can already see that we have 2 common notes between our F major and our A minor chord, right? And I think this is very interesting, you know, because now we got the relation between those chords, the relation of 2 common notes. So those, like, our goal was to sort the chords so that there is only one note that is changing all the time. So this is like the smoothest way to progress between your chords. Of course, you can also sort your chords in a way that there's only one common note, and then you have more possibilities. So if you want to progress very smoothly, you would try to, let's just open this virtual keyboard up here again, you would try to do as less change as possible, okay? So C major, and for example E minor, and this you can even loop this forever, you know. A lot of songs that are just like that. So if you want to progress super smoothly from here, you can just think yourself, okay, what's the close related chord to my E minor chord here? It's the G major chord, because it has 2 common notes. Now you can go back to your C major. Okay, and you should always have in mind that your dominant chord, the G chord, is leading back, because of the leading tone here, into your C. Okay, so this is something I would ask myself in the beginning of the production stage of my music, is how much change do I want to have? Do I want to make something really smooth? Do I want to use 2 chords, 3 chords, or 4 chords, or even more chords? So what we've made up here is not only showing you how you can progress from one to another chord very smoothly, but it's also showing you how you can substitute chords within each other. So if you're having a chord progression, let's just make something up here, pretty randomly actually. Let's just duplicate what we did here. And now let's go with a 1. So C major. Oops. Let's go with the 1, 5, 6, 4. Alright, so now you've written your chord progression, 1, 5, 6, 4 progression, and now you want to duplicate it. And if you want to loop it throughout your track, you know, or your production, or even your piano playing, or whatever it is, you know, maybe you don't want the same progression all the time. So what I want to show you now is you can use those chords that are very similar to each other to substitute a chord that is repeating in your chord progression. So for example, if we are starting at our C major and then we're going to our 5th position to our G major chord, we could substitute this chord with a chord that is very similar to it, because it has, you know, it has 2 common notes. It sounds very, very close to it. That's why it's working out. This is like the logic behind it. All right, so you can see that our G major chord could be substituted with either the B diminished chord or with our E minor chord. So let's see what makes sense in our case. So if we want to substitute this one here, we would just leave the B and the G where they are and just transpose the D up to the E. Okay, and now we've substituted our G major chord with an E minor chord in our diatonic scale. Okay, so now we can go on and do the substitution as much as we want, you know. This is just making your chord progression a little bit more interesting in the end. So let's substitute this A minor chord here. What I'm looking for when I substitute those chords is that I'm not substituting them with a chord that's before or afterwards, you know, because then you have 2 times the same chord, and we want to create change in this chord progression, so this is not what we are looking for actually. Alright, so we have our A minor chord and we want to substitute it. So let's see. And I mean, you can also, you know, like just watch your piano if you're a little bit familiar with it, and you have your A minor, and now you're okay. If I change one note, what will happen? So if I change this note, just a half step, okay, now I see I have the F major second inversion, because if you transpose it down here, you have your F major chord, right? Cool, so one possibility would be the F major chord that we could use for our substitution of the A minor chord. Okay, so what would be another example? Another example would be transposing this A here to a G, for example. And then we would have our C major chord again. I think I would go with this F major chord. So let's have a look at our progression real quick. What's coming afterwards? Nope, we're not going we're not going with our F major chord, because that's the one coming afterwards. So we need to do the substitution with the C major chord. Okay, so let's do that. We have to switch from our A to our G. And now there's already our C major chord here. And you know, this will blend pretty good because we have a lot of common notes here. I mean, now we have C major here and here, so I don't know if a substitution at this point is actually intelligent or necessary, but we'll have a listen, and yeah, this was just for the sake of showing you how to do it, okay? We can also undo it. Okay, so I think I would transpose this one back to the A, because I think an A minor makes more sense at that point. Okay, so I really want to get into your head and that you understand this relationship between the individual notes and them making up chords and all that stuff, okay? Because, for example, if you have a C major chord, right? And now we know that our substitution of that C major chord could be, for example, a E minor chord. Okay, or if we have it in our root position, it would be like that. So what happens if we stack a E minor chord over a C major chord? We will just have to add the C here. And now we have a C major 7 chord, which we analyzed in the previous chapter. So that's a pretty interesting thing, right? Because now we have our C major chord and we have our E minor chord combined. So if you use those similar chords that we just made up and stack them on top of, if you use the chord substitutions of your chord you're currently in and stack them on top of the chord, or not even on top, you can also voice it differently, you will get interesting results. And this is also a good logic, you know, because now you can use this as a tool to like make up 7th chords, okay? So let's just do it with our F major chord, okay? So if we are F major, we know that if we stack on top of that F major a minor chord, we have our F major 7th chord here, right? So of our F major, another chord substitution for our F major would be our A minor. If we stack the A minor on top of our F major, we have our F major 7th chord. Alright? So this is something you can experiment with a little bit. So this was the chord substitution with 2 similar notes. If we stack a chord on another chord with 1 similar note, it would get a little bit of a crazier, like 6th chords and 9th chords, for example. So if you have a F major here, right? And if you stack a C major on top of that F major chord, what you will get? You'll get a C major 9th chord. C major 7 added 9th chord. F major 7 added 9th chord, right? F major 7, 9. You know? And I think this can help if you really want to like practice on a piano and if you want to get a deeper understanding of how like chords interfere with each other. All right, so I hope I could make the point clear of how everything is related in music. So how do you write chords in the end? So let's sum this up a little bit. I think it's about that you, first of all, you know where you wanna go, and on that way that you will do while you produce music, you will find which kind of progressions, which kind of sounds you like, and this is something you can even like use for yourself to make up your own style. So there are a lot of artists that, you know, they couldn't play the piano, electronic music artists, and they were like always just switching between like, okay, I know this two chords here. This is the C major, E minor example that we've had earlier. And their style was to just use two chords changing all the time. So this can even, if you're watching it from a higher perspective, this could be something that complements to your own musical style. So use the ingredients, wisely, because even though people cannot say, oh yeah, he's using two chords all the time, that's why his music sounds like him or like her, they will sense it. So first of all, how do you write chords is get aware how many chords you want to write. Do you make a more complex composition or can it be a little bit more easy? And if you know that, you will have to decide whether you want to make up a story that is very tension and release-ish, kind of. So you have your home base and then you're walking somewhere, telling a story, going to the most tensional chord, the dominant chord, and then coming back home, or not even coming back home, to your C major chord, but substituting your C major chord with a E minor chord, for example, So if we would start walking on our C major and then we go somewhere like, I don't know, A minor, so we get a more like melancholy feel. And now we are walking towards our fifth or dominant chord, our G major. And now, of course, actually, this wants to resolve back into our C major, but now we say, no, we don't want to resolve. We want to like trick the listener a little bit and substitute our C major with our E minor chord. And then we can do that. Okay, so now it's a little bit hard to listen to this because we want it to resolve, but this is something you can play around with. It's just a stylistic choice in the end. All right, so something that we haven't talked about is like rhythm and length of chords. Okay, so now we have always been starting on our one. And we have like a length of a quarter note here, right? I mean, this is like, we can also go in like a more dance-ish tempo here. Okay, so this would be a way too fast, chord progression actually, because you want to give yourself a little bit more time than that. Okay, so let's just copy this over here and I will just show you what I mean. Okay, so let's start on our C major. Now we'll give ourselves a little bit more time. Okay, you can already feel that you can relax a little bit more into that chord, right? And this is not even, you can make chords that are way longer, okay? So we can even make it 2 bars long. Okay, and now we can go and, I don't know, change to our E minor. Now we can go further on if we would like to do so. What I just want to show you is we shouldn't get stuck in our comfort zone, because, and I don't even mean that it's comfortable or something to only write the same chords over and over again, but I had a friend and he was showing me a track and he stretched the chord so long. And if you now imagine like an evolving patch or something, then, because now of course it's very boring because nothing happens here, Now it's just fading away. Now the next one is coming, blah, blah. But if you imagine this being a really nice pad evolving, man, you can really write long chords and they will give a very dreamy and ever-evolving atmospherical vibe to your track. Okay, so just with playing with the length of your chords is important. And not only the length, also the like rhythmical timing is important. So you don't necessarily have to start on your one, okay? You can also like just take your chords and let them start like on the 2, for example, on the second quarter of your bar. And then you can start making a lot of other different adjustments to the rhythm, right? So you can even like put this somewhere else. This is most easy if you get a little bit like piano practice for your playing, because then you can sense how it feels right. Okay, so there's no rule here what's right or wrong. Okay, so this is really a thing you have to listen for in context with your whole production in the end. So I just wanted to make the point clear that this is very abstract how we're looking at things at the moment, you know, with just our piano chords. All right, so let's close this small chapter of voicing and chord substitution and like the storytelling part of your chords, and let's move on and go into another like approach or like a hack, we can say, that you can use to come up very fast with cool chord progressions, which is a little bit different from what we've been doing now. So I've prepared like a bass patch here and a chord patch, and also a kick, which is from my sample pack. Alright, so let's just create a kick here. Let's just decrease the volume so it's not that annoying all the time. Okay, so what I want to do is just create a MIDI clip. This is just a very basic diva patch, nothing special about it. And now we're in our C major / A minor scale, as you know, the relative minor scale. And like in most electronic music, I would say we would like start on maybe more of a minor chord, A minor, for example. But this is also a personal preference from my side, okay? But it has nothing to do with the whole procedure we're going to do. I just wanted to explain why I'm using A. So let me just decrease the envelope amount here, so it's very close down. Okay, so what I want to refer to here is this principle of consonance and dissonance we've talked about in consonant and dissonant intervals, right? You remember octave is the most consonant one, also the most boring one. Then there's the fifth, which is a consonant interval. Then we have our major third, our minor third, and our fourth. And those are our consonant intervals. Our dissonant intervals are, let's just have a listen so you can really, sense what I mean. And you can hear what I mean, which is most important at this point. So again, consonant intervals are octave, fifth, major third, minor third, and fourth. Some people are arguing about that one, if that is really a consonant one, but it depends on the context. But this is too far out to discuss it here. Alright, so now we know our consonant intervals, and all the other intervals, they are, again, I have to do it again. Let's just quickly repeat our consonant and dissonant intervals. So we have our octave, most consonant one, then our fifth, also very consonant, and that's because of the ratio between like the sinus waves going on there. Then we have our major third, our minor third, we have our minor sixth, and our major sixth. And all the other intervals, minor second, you can hear it's like just so dissonant, major second, tritone, minor seventh, major seventh. They are all dissonant, okay? There's a chart and a PDF for you that you can download. Alright, so let's get back into our Ableton session, and now we will use those dissonant and consonant intervals to make a pretty solid harmonic foundation. What do we mean by a harmonic foundation? As we learned, is that if you have a bass line, it will dictate your harmonic way. So the lowest note of your track will always say where we're at harmonically. So if the lowest note is whatever it is a C, everything that comes on top of this, on this note, will add to the C chord. And then it can be like a C sus2 chord, or it can be a major or a minor or whatever. Crazy jazzy voicings and all that stuff, but it will be a C because we have our C here. Okay, so if we change this root note here, especially if you have it in the bass, and you change it to, for example, a D, now this would be like a D9 sus4 with an added major sixth chord, okay? So This is how you perceive music because of the bass line. Okay, so now let's get to the point. So if we start on our A here, right? Now we can think in our consonant intervals, and now we can use all of our consonant intervals, you remember them, and just move up or down within those consonant intervals, but only within our diatonic scale of C major, or call it A minor, doesn't matter, okay? And this will sound pretty good. So this is a rule of thumb that you can use. Okay, so we have our A here. So what would be a consonant interval inside our scale? So we have a third, that would be the C. So we can move to the C here. We could also move to our fifth, which would be the E. Okay, so and we're always looking from the A, okay? So we're looking from the A, and then there's the E, which is the fifth. So now we're going back to the A, and then we see, okay, what's the next consonant interval from here? That's the C, okay? So now we can put a bass note in the C here. Now we're going back to the A, and then we see, okay, what's maybe a consonant interval downwards that's also working? Maybe a major third down, which is an F. So we just go here to our F. Okay, so if you have a listen now. I'm just transposing them down an octave. Sorry. I had low cut enabled. Okay, so you can already hear that's a bass line that would work out. So let's do another example. So we're just deleting those again. Okay, so now you're starting with your A. What's the next consonant interval? We can go to the C. Then we're going back to our A. We're thinking about consonant intervals. Okay, maybe major sixth up. What's the major sixth from our A? That's and this is, for example, this is not possible because the major sixth would be the F sharp, but we cannot use the F sharp because it's not in our diatonic scale of C major or our relative minor scale A minor, okay? So now you have to see, okay, I cannot use that, but I can go up a minor sixth, which is also a consonant interval, and then we're landing at our F. And now you can think, okay, maybe that's enough. I just want to make a free chord progression. So now you take the F, you can just go to the left here and hit legato, so it will expand the note to the end. And now you have another chord progression. And it's not even a chord progression at the moment because we're not stacked any chords on top of it, but we've laid down our root note. So let's just duplicate this for a moment and layer the chords on top of that, okay? So let's select them all, transpose them up by an octave by hitting the shift button and then just pressing the arrow up. Okay, so now we can use our A. Let's just transpose them one more octave. A, we need a fifth, and I want to do this open voicings that we've talked about, right? So we could put our C here in our like root position of our A minor. Or we take the C and we transpose it up an octave. Here, and it will sound much better. If you use it with synth, it's very, very nice. It sounds really good. Okay, so let's transpose it up an octave. Then we are moving to our C major chord, so we can just stay here with our E, and then we go to a G. So and now you can like voice leading wise, it's a little bit hard here. So either you transpose this up as well, and now we're just jumping up, or you leave it down here. So this voice like falls down to this note here, and this voice goes up, and this just stays. So it could make sense to not use the open voicing on this chord, but we will listen to it and then we'll decide. I mean, this is basically just up to your taste. Alright, and then we're going to an F. F in C major is F major chord, okay, so let's just stack our notes on top of that. And then I would go to something like this. Okay, so now let's have a listen. Already sounds pretty cool, you know? So let's try just this one with the open voicing if it sounds better. Sounds also good. Alright, so but you get the point, and I think it's such a nice approach, and it's such an easy approach, and it will nearly always sound pretty good. Okay, so let's do another example. Let's not start on our A minor chord, for example. So we can start on our C major here, right? Okay, so let's start on our C major chord. Now we're just creating the bass line. C major, so now we have our consonant intervals. So let's go back up to our major third, which is the E. And then we can go from our C, we can go a fifth down, for example, to our F. Maybe it's a little low. And then we can go minor third down to our A. This is really random, you know, I'm not even thinking about like how it will sound like, but I know that it will sound good somehow. So let's have a listen. Okay, and now we can stack our chords on top of that. Now with E minor. So let's do a smooth voice leading here. Now in the end, A minor here. Okay, and now you know, now you have something that you can work with. And now you can go and say, okay, that chord is I don't know, I don't like that chord. And then you go and substitute it, or you completely change it, you know, and you go back to your root and you think your consonant interval again, and then you just pick another note, you know, that you can use for your bass foundation, and you build up your chord on that one. So I think this is a pretty practical approach, because you don't get into the writer's block so much, you know, and you can just experiment with the different combinations of that. And I had some students and I showed them this trick, and they were just blown away and very happy, and that's why I showed you, and I hope it will help you to overcome the writer's block a little bit. And yeah, what is another great thing about this technique is that if you use the dissonant intervals, so we can use the consonant intervals for our like landing chords, but we can also use our like more dissonant intervals for like passing chords. And this is something else that we have to talk about in this harmony course. Okay, so let's talk about some passing chords. So I'll just use this MIDI here and transpose it up to my piano. Let's mute this one so we have a little bit more rhythmic clarity. Alright, so what are passing chords? Passing chords are actually chords that just, you know, that you use to pass on to the next chord. So with our strategy of our diatonic, consonant and dissonant intervals, we can use like our dissonant intervals to make up those passing chords. So now we are in our C major here. So let's just open or drag our MIDI information to the left here a little bit to make some space for a passing chord. Now what we can do is we can use one of our dissonant intervals to make up a passing chord. So from our C, we always looking, like the strategy is always just working if you're looking from the perspective of the C, okay? So from a C, a dissonant interval would be the D, for example. So we could use a D minor chord as a passing chord here, right? So let's try this. D, A, and F. So this one will be. So we can use this D as a passing chord. And why is that? So if we have a look at our bass note information and we type in our D here, you see that it's only like, now it's creating an upward stepwise motion, you know? and it's just in the nature of our dissonant intervals, which are, for example, our major second, that they will be close to the C note here, right? So this one will create like a good stepwise motion here. So if we have a listen, so now we are in our E minor chord. So this is one possible way to do a passing chord. But passing chords by themselves, you can actually use whatever chord you want as a passing chord, because it's just there for a very short time, and the brain does not adapt it, and it's not thinking about, okay, this is now the chord that's going to stay here forever, you know. And this has also something to do with the rhythmical placement of it. Like a passing chord should always come here, you know, at the very end of your first chord. So it should be a very short amount, and after that there should be something happening, okay, because it's creating some change that wants to resolve again. So what would be other passing chords that we can do here in this example? So if we have a look at our C, a dissonant interval would be also the minor seventh. So we could use, would be also the major seventh, we're in major here, and which would be the B, and then we can like use the B flat, B diminished chord as a passing chord. So let's try this out. Would be like this. Okay, and now what my brain expects is that this kind of movement happens every time the chord is changing. You know, that it's happening every time. So this is how you can fulfill the listener's expectation, and then you can of course say, no, I'm not doing it in this position, and then it will, you know, create some interest because it's not happening what was expected. So this is also something you should train your ear and your musical senses to, you know, you can tune in on that a little bit. Alright, so another thing that I wanted to mention here is that this rule of thumb, or this like chapter that we're currently talking about, like with this approach of dissonant and consonance and building your chords on top of the movement of those intervals, this is not the only way that it's working. I think it's working pretty well because of the relation between the different harmonic structures and the intervals, and it's all interfering. But of course you can take a dissonant interval, move up a dissonant interval in your scale, like our C major, a dissonant interval from C would be the D, and then build a chord on top of that. That's also possible, and I'm not saying that it's not good or something, okay? So keep that in mind. What I explained to you, that rule is just for very harmonic in progressions, but it's leaving out some notes of the scale, and if you want to use those notes and build chords on that notes after your C major, please feel free to do so. So you can also do, you know, something like this. That's no problem. Alright, so let's continue with the next chapter where we're going to talk about borrowed chords. Borrowed chords. How do you define borrowed chord? Borrowed chord, the way I understood it, is a chord that you borrow from a different scale. And not all scales make sense, but closely related scales make sense, where you don't have to do too much modulation and alternation of your notes. And I will show you what I mean by that. So if we have a look at our chord progression here, it's a minor, E minor, C major, F major chord progression. This is just something I've made up randomly. So let's have a listen now. Alright, so now if we have a look at the chords here, we can think about alternating the quality of those chords. So we're not alternating the quality of our first chord, of our like root chord, because that would change our tonality, and that would be modulation, which is something else if you modulate in a different tonality. But this is, like, in general, it's not used too much in electronic music, like in a standard electronic music. I'm very happy if they use harmonies at all. So I would recommend you to leave your root note that is defining your like tonality, so the C, when you're working in C, leave the C major, or in this case it's the A minor, leave it where it is. You don't want to modulate that one, or you don't want to alternate that one. After this A minor chord that we have here, there's this E minor chord playing afterwards, right? And this could be something that where we can borrow a chord from a different tonality. So I think it's better to think of this principle in the way that let's alternate something, but not too much, okay? Because otherwise you would just jump out somewhere randomly and that the listener would sense it, you know? So is there a note that we can alternate here? One of those notes that would give the whole chord a different quality maybe. And yes, there is a note, and it's the third, because the third of a chord defines the tonal quality of that chord. So we could make that E minor E major, for example. And this is also lead voicing and voice. We could make that E minor chord a E major chord, and that's also smart because then we have a very, very smooth voice leading. So if you have a look at our E minor chord, which is in our open voicing here and in an inversion, so here's our third, it's down below. Then we have our root note, here the E, and then we have our B. So to just show this process here real quick, standard E minor chord, and now we just transpose the third down. And this is still an E minor, but it sounds totally different than the standard one. Right? And now we can alternate that G. If we move that G a half step up, we get an E major chord. Because if you have a look here, if we move that G, which is the minor third of the E up, we have an E major chord, okay? It's just a little bit harder to understand because it's down here, you know? And we think, oh, what kind of chord is that? Sounds weird and all this stuff. But it's just now it's an E major chord. So now let's have a listen. Let's listen one more time with the minor. Also nice, and you know, now we've transposed this one up, and as you can see, it's not in this orange marked stripes here anymore. So it's not originally in our scale of C major or A minor. What is very interesting is this voice leading here, because now our lowest notes of our chords are very smoothly, you know. So smooth means not too much movement. So we're not jumping around here. No, we're not even jumping around. We're having the best voice leading possible, just a half step down all the time, you know. So this is how I would go about like borrowing chords. I wouldn't go like let's make up a different scale and pick any chord and then we just borrow it and put it there. You know, this is not making any sense. You know, because now you're keeping a good connection to your original tonality. All right. So because you still have a common note here between your A minor and your E, and you still have your B that is inside your scale of A minor, okay? So we can just go on and we can have a look what else we could maybe borrow. So this next chord is the C major chord, and I would be a little bit, I don't know if we can change this one, because it's also like the one in our major scale or relative major scale to our A minor scale, so I would watch out at this one, but I think we can do something about this F major here. So what do we have to do to change the quality of our F major? We have to change the third, and the third is in this case this A here, and we can change this to a flat or G sharp. So now we have our chromatic lowest note going chromatically up, which can be good, but could also be too far out. Let's have a listen. So it works. It's not sounding like something like completely out of space and completely weird, but I think for me it's, I don't know, I think I would, like with borrowed chords in our electronic music, I wouldn't go too crazy with them, because then you're just landing somewhere where it's very filmish and very more like classical, you know. So I would just go with our F major chord at this point. So I would say we will do another example of this chord borrowing combined with this dissonant and consonant technique that I showed you earlier of just making up chord progressions. Alright, so let's just duplicate this real quick. I will also delete the markers, and let's delete those here. And now we just So we're going to start on our A minor chord, which is our root minor chord, and now we can think of our consonant intervals, which is maybe like could be a minor third, could be the next tone. Okay, so now we're going up a fifth. Fifth would be the E. And now we're thinking of our A, and then we're just going down, don't know, a third, major third. So which third is possible in our scale? So now we're in F major here. All right, so let's build chords on top of that. Just copy them over. A minor, we'll just go with our standard voicing here. C major. I'm already doing them in the right voice leading way, so we have a smooth voice transitioning here between those. Cool, so this is our C major at that point. So let's get to our E minor here, which would be that. Two of the same notes here, which is great. Now we have F major. Would be do something like this. So there's a pretty drastic change here in the end where we're going into, like from a E minorish feeling to a majorish feeling here without any common note. So there's a pretty big change there, but we'll see how it works. Works pretty well actually. Okay, so don't go out too far into the water, you will hurt yourself. So first one we cannot change because we need to get home somewhere, okay? So we can leave that the way it is. The second one is again the C major, and I don't know, I don't have a good feeling about that C major changing it, because it's the one of the most strongest chords in the relative major scale. But I would say we can change something about either this E minor here again or about this F major in the end. Let's try to change this F major chord here from our major to our minor third. And now what's interesting is that if you watch the movement of this voice, of this lower voice here, we have a G, G sharp, A, which is all half tones, semitones, which is a pretty smooth voice leading. And then we're going down a whole tone, which is okay. So let's have a listen how it sounds. Okay, so what's happening now is we are in our E minor here, and then we're changing to our actual F major, but we borrowed our F minor because we transposed our A down here. But I think the problem here is now it's not sounding very good because there's so much changing. So all the notes are changing here to there, and then we're adding another note that's not inside the scale. So this is something you should watch out for, because I think for me it sounds too far off. Let's listen one more time. It's just too much of a change there. So I would say we won't change this last chord here because there's too much change going on. Alright, maybe we can try to alternate our C major chord, even though I think it won't work out that good, but let's just try it. So to change the quality of our C major chord, we just have to transpose our E down to our D sharp. Now we have a C minor chord after our A minor chord. It's not working out. So let's leave it where it was and let's try the E again. And I think this could work out pretty well, because then we have our upward half step motion here again. I think it's working out pretty well. I don't know if I like the last chord in general, because it's now every note is changing, and yeah, I don't know if I like this actually, but yeah, we could try to change the last one. How can we do it so that one note is just stays where it is? Or we could actually take this A down to a G sharp, and now we have an F minor after a E major, which is actually the major third of the E is at the same time the minor third of the F, but this will sound very far out, but it would be funny because now we're, one voice is like staying where it is. And I think, this is going to places where it's not really usable at the moment for our music, but the thinking behind it is interesting I think for you, so that you're watching the individual notes and you're not too much into, okay, where you're at in the chord, but you're also watching the tones and the notes inside your chord. Okay, it's just too far out. Let's be honest about this one. All right, so in both examples, this E minor worked out pretty well when we borrowed a chord, when we made the quality major, and we borrowed that chord from the E major scale. Okay, so let's close this chapter of borrowing chord, or let's call it changing the quality of a chord within your chord progression. And the next thing I want to talk about to you is secondary dominance. So I've made up a chord progression right here, which is very similar to the first one, but the last chord, it's just not a F major, but a G major, so the dominant chord, right? So that's the only thing. So let's listen to this chord progression. Okay, so what is a secondary dominant? A secondary dominant is just the dominant of the dominant. So if we watch our scale, we know the dominant of the C is the G, and now we just have to go up a perfect fifth from our G to our D, and then we know that the major chord on that position will be the dominant of the dominant of our C major chord, okay? And this is just a very common thing to just create a little bit more interest before your dominant chord. So if we have a look at the bass line, we're here at the E, and then we're just reducing the length of it to the half, and as I said, the dominant of the G is the D, so we're just going down a whole step here, putting in the note D, our root bass note, and now we have to adjust this chord here, and the second dominant or the double dominant is of course not inside your original scale. You have to be aware of that. So this is a non-diatonic chord that we are using here. So as I said, so this is the way you look it up. C, the dominant is G. That's the chord we're having, and now we're finding the dominant of our dominant, which is the D, and not only the D but the D major. Okay, so now we can use those notes here. So we just copy those notes over here. And now we go to the D here, and here we use the third, which is F sharp. Watch out, this is the note we will need here. And the A. So this will be the double dominant of our dominant chord. Maybe it's smoother if we go like this, because then we have a half step voice leading here. Let's have a listen. Maybe we just take the whole lower notes and transpose them up, so we have a little bit of a sound that's more separate from our bass line. Okay, so this is how you implement a secondary dominant into your track. And like with dominants, they always lead because of their leading tone, which is only in there, which is the third of our dominant as our leading tone, right? So here. Dun, 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 dun. This wants to resolve, but it's more clear if it's a dominant seventh chord, so. Because of this tritone, we talked about this already in this course. It wants to resolve here. So actually, if you're more into jazz harmony and all that stuff, you can put secondary dominants kind of everywhere, So now we have our G dominant 7, and then we're resolving to our C major 7th. And now if we want to move on in our chord progression, wherever we want to go, it doesn't really matter. So if we wanted to go to, for example, our A minor 7th as a next chord, we could think, okay, now we want to go to our A minor, but we could use a dominant in front of that A minor that is leading into that A minor, you know? So what would be the dominant of the A? The dominant of the A would be an E dominant 7. So we can try to make a E dominant 7. And now A minor 7. Okay, and this is how you can progress through like a lot of different chords. Okay, so now we're at A minor 7. We say, okay, I want to go to D minor 7. So what's the dominant of the D minor 7? It's the A dominant 7th chord. So now we're at A minor 7th. So we're thinking, okay, now we have to make this minor, we have to make it dominant. So we're just leaving the 7th where it is. We're transposing up the 3rd. And now we're going to our D minor 7. Okay, so just that you get an impression on how cool those like secondary dominants are, not only if you use them with the other dominant together, but that's I think in classical music the way they did it there. Alright, so in general I would recommend you to just experiment a little bit with this stuff. So if you're just like putting a hand on your A minor grip here, and you're having your left hand for your bass note, right? And now you just try around and transpose this left note, and you're pressing in the right hand always the A minor chord. Just going down the scale. Sounds very interesting, right? So I think this is how like F major 7th now, A minor 7 again. That's very interesting, you know, and you can also like write a progression that is kind of like this, with not too much varying notes in the right hand. Now I'm just adding here the 5th in the left hand. Okay, so have fun experimenting with this, and you don't have to change on the one everything all the time. It's also nice if there is something clashing at a certain time, you know, and then it's not too childish and too standard in a way. Alright, so I would just like to sum up this chord writing session a little bit and get everything together that we've did here. So we've started in like how to write chords, and that the mindset is important of like you're starting somewhere and then you're going somewhere else, and the way this differs from the previous chord is very important, and this is just up to your taste how much you want this chord to change. Should it be more subtle? Should it be very drastic change? Should it be a change to maybe the dominant that is then leading back into your major 1 chord? So those are all thoughts that you can make yourself at that stage. Should that chord be very long, stretched out, which will create a more atmospheric feel if you fill it up with a more paddish sound in the end, of course? Or do you want your chords to be changing very, very fast? So this is just the storytelling questions that you have to ask yourself when you are composing your music. We had our chord substitutions, where we've learned that if you have a chord and you just change the 3rd of that chord, you change the whole quality of the chord. Major, minor. But if you change the root note or the 5th, you will change it if you do it diatonically to a completely different chord. Now it's C major, now it's A minor, right? So that's very interesting and something you can play around with, and that also showed the similarities between an A minor chord and a C major chord, for example, or a C major and an E minor chord. And that's also why substitutions work out, because they have notes that are similar or are the same actually. the next thing we had a look at was this dissonant and consonant harmonic bassline progression approach, if I want to call it like this, and where you pick a consonant interval and then you move up from your root note in that interval or move down diatonically, and then you can pick that as a next bass note, just put it in there, do it how often times you want, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, however, how much chords you want, and then you stack the chords on top of that, and then you can still decide, maybe I want a sus2 chord here and there, or maybe I want a borrowed chord, or I want to change the quality or something. So just a little bit of a writer's block approach to writing chords very fast that work out. Then we had a little bit of a look at the secondary dominants and why they also work in all kind of different approaches, even if you don't have a dominant for a dominant, but just for a regular chord in your diatonic scale. So I hope I could show you my approach and also my way of thinking about chords, which is sometimes a little bit complex, but I think if you're really into it, it can make so much fun. And I really like to sit in front of the piano and think about chords and, just really figure them out. And yeah, I hope you have fun figuring out chords. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact us, and we're glad to help out, and see you soon. Bye-bye. Hey peoples, welcome back in our Melodic House series, and today we're going to have a look at harmonics, and for that we've analyzed a couple of tracks, 7 tracks, just from the biggest artists, and I was just scrolling through their Spotify profiles and just picking the top track. So for example, we have Ben Böhmer's Breathing together with I think Malou and Nils Hoffmann, we have Mouillé from And Me, we have Moments from a remix from Nils Hoffmann and Ben Böhmer. We have Jan Blomqvist's top track, which is More at the moment. Then we have Massanet with Never Love, Mind Against, Walking Heavy, and Rufus du Sol, You Were Right. Those are the tracks that we are going to have a look at, and we will do the same procedure with every track. We will we will go through the track, we will analyze it, we can have a listen to the tracks. I rebuilt all those tracks. I didn't really got too crazy into the sound design part, and it's also not properly mixed and mastered, but I just wanted to catch the vibe of the tracks as well, because sometimes also the sound design is important when we're talking about harmonic stuff. But those progressions and all those examples, they have their own unique characteristics and their own unique styles, and in the end of this class, you will have tools that you can use, like cooking ingredients harmonically for your tracks and for your compositions. And this is what I wanted to create with all of this, with this melodic house program here in this harmonic part. So the structure of this course will be every time we will analyze first the scale and then the chords that are in the scale, or we can do it vice versa as well, because when we notice the chords that are inside those chord progressions, we know a scale as well, or we can guess the scale depending on this knowledge that we have. And then we'll proceed and we will try to figure out what's the primary aspect, what's the most important thing that's going on inside that chord progression, what is making this one special from just very boring. Another thing that I implemented was when I created this course, I had this idea that actually sometimes the chord progressions, they're very standard. They're not even super hard, There's nothing too special about them. But why do they still sound so good when the top producers use them? And this is something I wanna focus on as well, which is how to uncheese your cheesy chord progressions. So I extracted the chord progressions and put them in a piano and made them super cheesy, just the basic, have a listen So it's a nice progression, but it sounds super cheesy, because it's only getting played with the piano. So this is a part that I wanted to integrate just to make things a little bit more clear for you, how to uncheese your productions somehow. Okay, so without further talking, let's start directly with our first example, which will be Breathing from Ben Böhmer, and we will first have a listen to the reproduction that I made of this track, and then we will analyze the primary aspects of this chord progression and of how it was done, and then we will go a little bit deeper. So let's have a listen. As you can see, I have the chords up here, so we can just loop this section. It's just 4 bars long. I just doubled this for the sake of more time. So let's have a listen here. So this is the cheesy version of Ben Böhmer Breathing, as we had to listen earlier. Okay, so if you have a listen to this progression over like the reproduction that I've made, you can already hear that it sounds much better. So let's have a listen without the cheesy piano on top of it. This is, by the way, just a grand piano from Ableton. Okay, so let's just go through the different parts here real quick. So we have just a basic kick. Those are all PML samples, by the way. So we have our kick here, clap, then we have this bass line here, diva chords, some plucky material, the top hat, and then actually a melody, but this is not part of this program here, so we can just get rid of this stuff. Okay, so what first sticks out for me is this triplet rhythm. So we are not in a standard pattern here, we are in triplets. It's like dun 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 dun, 1 2 3 1 2 3 da 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 da. And this gives the track a very distinct and a kind of different feel. But I think that people don't really like get it that those are triplets, you know. So I think this is like using triplets in your course or in your like in general in your material can really help you, you know, just doing something different which has a different groove, but people won't be like, okay, this is in triplets and this is in straight 16th notes or something. So this was the first, like one of the primary aspects that stood out for me in this progression here. The next thing is, and that's why I've called like this Ben Böhmer breathing recreation, I've called it like the sus2 triplet method somehow, because he uses sus chords a lot in general in his productions. And our first two chords here, which are E sus2, so if we have a look at the bass line here, you can see that the root note is the first note is the E, then it goes up to a G, which is a minor third above the E, then it goes up a major third, and then it goes down a whole step. So this is like the whole like chord progression that is going on here. He stacked just the chords on top of those bass notes. Okay, so talking about sus chords, what is a sus chord? A sus chord is a suspended chord. So we are actually, if we have a normal chord, which consists like a triad chord out of 3 notes, root, third, fifth, we suspend the third. We don't use it in that chord, but we use the 9th, which is 1 whole step above the root note of that chord. And I'll just load up a piano here, which I can just, you know, control with my MIDI controller here. Okay, so every time I'm just dialing something in here on the piano, you can visually see it here, and that's just helping out if you want to understand what I'm doing if I play something to show you some tricks or something. So a sus chord, like a normal E minor chord, would be this, right? Root note, minor third, major third on top of the minor third, or if you want like just a fifth from the root note. So this is a normal chord, like a normal minor triad chord. And if you suspend this note, if you just alternate it 1/2 step down, you will get this suspended 2, like the E sus2 chord. And this sounds not that good in this lower register, but if you transpose it up, you can already hear that it sounds better. And another trick to make those sus2 chords stick out pretty nicely is to take this note and just transpose it up an octave. So if we take this and transpose it up, it will land here on this F sharp. And now you can hear it sounds very, very pleasing. So if we transpose this whole voicing down an octave, we have this very nice, calming sus2 sound. Let's compare it with a normal minor chord by transposing this 9th up in a 1/2 step to the minor third. And I think this is a very nice trick to use sus chords in a minor context, because you can, you know, just hide the minor character a little bit. So he's using this chord here, but it's not really feeling super sad, you know. This would be, okay, we're in minor here, but this is more open, more relaxed. And this is also because, you know, I've talked about like consonant and dissonant intervals in the basic harmony course. And if you have a look at the intervals inside of this chord, which is just a fifth here and another fifth on top of that fifth, and a fifth is a very, very like consonant interval. It's just very pleasing within each other. This is why it's making sense, you know, because those are all very pleasing intervals here. This is why it's not clashing, especially if you have it on the top here. Alright, so first chord, E sus2, next chord is the G sus2. And then he is moving into this B minor for the first time. And then he's going to an A major chord. So let's have a listen again. And I will just pop up the chords here. So this is basically exactly what I just played here. The open voicing, this is called if you transpose the third or the note that is in between, like the most. So this is like, so those are all open chord voicings. Open chord voicings are if you just take your third or whatever tone is in the middle of the both other tones, okay? So notes. So we've had this, sorry, I have to enable this here. So you can also transpose this third up here, and then you also have a open voicing, or as I did here, for example, the B minor chord. It's just, this would be a normal B minor chord, but if we transpose this third up an octave, we have an open voicing B minor chord. Alright, so that's it about like the basic chord structure. So we have our E sus2, our G sus2, our B minor, and then our A major chord. Okay, so far so good. But like, what's the special thing about this chord progression? The special thing is here that we are in E Dorian. Dorian means this is a scale mode. So if you have a normal minor scale, it consists of a certain halftone and whole tone structure that I explained also in the basic harmony course, right? If you have a Dorian scale, a minor Dorian scale, you don't have a flat sixth. I will just show you this real quick. So normal E minor scale would be like this: E, F sharp, G, minor third, fourth, fifth, minor sixth, seventh, and octave again. So this would be a normal E minor scale. But the Dorian scale, it transposes this minor sixth up to a major sixth here. What's happening here is that now we just have a different set of chords that we can use for our track, for our composition. And this is why the last chord, I think this is pretty cool, because in the beginning you think, okay, yeah, I think it's like just a regular like E minor, like Aeolian minor, so natural minor track, but then the last chord surprises you. And because the last chord isn't the A minor that you would maybe like as a listener expect to be there, but it's this major chord, this really beautiful major chord here. So let's have a listen to this. If I unfold this whole thing here, we can have a closer look at our chords. So if we would like to hear the real difference, we could try to... We have this C sharp on top of here, and like in our regular E minor scale, we would have the C, which would be the minor third of the A, right? So if we transpose this down, of course now it falls out of our grid here that we've shown here, because I've enabled the scale mode here with the E Dorian. Okay, so now you can see it's not in the E Dorian anymore, but this would be in the E. If we go to E minor, now this note is again inside of our E minor scale, right? Natural minor. So now let's have a listen with this A minor chord at the end, okay? And then we switch back and just compare those. This does not sound good. Alright, so if we transpose it up again. I think another point why this is working so well is like this half step here in the end, like we're just... You know, people tend to like chord progressions, or in general also melodies that don't, you know, jump too far apart from the last note. So if you have a nice smooth shape, a nice voice leading, a nice chord leading, you know, like all the voices, they're not jumping around too much. So you try to get them as close as possible together. This will sound like pleasing to the listener. And I think that's also a good point why, I mean, those notes here are just a half step apart from each other. And yeah, this is making this chord progression very, very nice here in the end. Alright, so if we have a look here in our like cheesy chords again, and if we would take like all those, you know, let's just delete those chords here and create a MIDI clip by hitting Shift Command and M. And now I will just show you how it would sound like if you have like a standard voicing and not the sus2 chord. So we have just a regular E minor chord, then we have just a regular G major chord, then we would just have a regular, I mean this is like an original B minor, and then we will go with this A minor chord here as well. Wait, I have to check, okay, we have to go up here to our C, A, E. It's nothing. It's not even nice at all if you compare it to what we had. So if you have a chord progression that's like that, you know, you can now use these tricks to change certain things at a certain point. Now you know, okay, if there's something that's not working out, what can I do? Now you have some tools, okay? You can change this third to a sus to the ninth, or this would like this would be a sus2 chord. You can also go and suspend or alternate the third of the chord to the fourth degree of the chord, so a sus4 chord, right? So either you go down a half step or a whole step, depends on if you have a major or minor chord, you'll get the sus2, or you go up, now you have a sus4. No, because this is the fourth, 1, 2, 3, 4 from E minor. And this is just a matter of taste and voice leading in the end. Okay, so let's go with our sus2 chord here. Then we will have our G sus2, so we're not using our major third here, which would make it very, very majorish. We are using our A here, which is the sus2. B minor, he left it like a B minor, but we could also go like with this with a sus2 here, because as you know we are in E Dorian, and E Dorian has the C sharp in it, and the C sharp is one whole step above our B. But I think it's nice to leave this one standard and the next one here, which is currently our minor, but I think it's nice if you leave this B minor chord, because then if you go to this A major chord, which is now an A major, this C is really surprising for the listener. You know, you could do like the sus2, which would mean we take the third and put it down to this 2, but then you would like, you know, take the note that is the most interesting before that last chord. And I think this would, you know, I don't know, maybe take away a little bit of the sparkle. We can try it. Let's move it down here so the voice leading is smoother. So I think it's nice if you just go with the natural B minor here. I think it's in general it's pretty good if you have a good relationship and a good mixture between, like, you have a couple of sus chords inside your composition, and then you also have like regular minor and major chords. That's it about like the basic like chord progression that is going on here. I mean, how he came up like exactly with first the E, then the G, then the B, and then the A, this is something I cannot tell you. I think this is just something he was just playing around and jamming around, you know. In the basic harmony part, I told you about this as approach to use consonant intervals from your root note of your scale to go up and down, and then you can take those bass notes and move on. And I think this could be also applied to this progression here, because if you think of an E, so let's just get this piano going here. So if you have an E, if you go up a third inside your diatonic scale, you will land on the G, which is the next chord, and if you go up a fifth from this E, you will land on the B here. And then the next thing is just the A, which is a fourth, which is also a consonant interval. So you could also make that progression up with that method I showed you in the basic harmony course, by just moving up and down consonant intervals from your root note and building chords on that notes that you landed on. Cool, so that's like the harmonic part. And now I just want to go a little bit into our sound design, because I think this is also pretty important if you're like composing melodic house, right? So let's have a listen again to our cheesy version. And if you hear weird noises in the background, it's raining really hard here actually in Berlin, so never mind that, please. So this is our cheesy version, right? But our, like, his version sounds so nice. Okay, so let's have a look at the sound design here. So we have our chords, which are in this open voicing that I've showed you earlier. And if you want to go into this really progressive style of melodic house, like Tinlicker, Ben Böhmer, Nils Hoffmann, also a little bit Lane 8, I would recommend you to use like nice thick chords and to stagger a lot of voices inside your, like the oscillators, for example, but also inside your piano roll, and use open voicings for that, and use sounds that create like a very nice vibe, you know, like a very moody style vibe. And you can have that pad here, it's just a diva, and you can start like this. And then over the time of the track, you can open it up. Okay, so this is a pretty like standard way that I would approach this kind of melodic house vibe chord-wise from the sound design perspective. Okay, so then I stacked this just with the bass notes. Those are also a diva. And as we said, this is in triplets. So if you load up an arpeggiator, you can use this 1/12 rate, and this is just a division of your bar. So 1/12 is equal to triplet grid, just so you know. And of course, if you are composing in triplets, you have to watch out that everything is in triplets, okay? So every grid, every MIDI clip you insert, you have to change this grid. So if you go inside the grid here and you right click, you can enable triplet grid here, and it will, have you seen it? It will change its settings here. Cool, so those are the bass notes, just very basic filtered saw wave. With envelope here. You can also open that up over the course of the track. You know, and this is already a style decision, because I don't know if like Ben or Nils Hoffmann, if they would open it up so hard. You know, now it gets angry, it gets here it's more subtle. It behaves. Alright, so there's really nothing too special about those things here. Another great thing is this diva plug here he is using in his track. It sounds like this. And it's just following the chords here. So if we fold this, enable our scale, E Dorian. So this is just the root and the fifth here. Root in the fifth, root in the fifth, root in the fifth. Okay, so this is something you can keep in mind. This is just adding harmonic rhythm, and therefore this is uncheesing like the chord progression, okay? So the general concept behind not making cheesy chord progressions is you try to mix up a lot of instruments that have a different sound, you know? So the changes between the notes, they are very fluent, you know, because this is like what makes it really cheesy and very cheap is like this, you know, if you listen to this first chord progression here, You know, you imagine a small child on the keyboard. Not very professional, you know, it's like a ding, 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 ding. And this is why we try to hide, you know, like the starting points. They shouldn't be like always on the one, because this is always the beat that everyone expects something to change on. And if we give that to the listener on all levels, you know, this will sound a little bit cheap and boring. So stack up your instruments within each other, and then you know you can create like more of a like an atmospheric chord progression that is developing throughout different instruments and interacting with each other, because you're following, of course, the chord progression. And then we have like this hi-hats that we've talked about earlier. And he's using just, you know, like the same rhythm here everywhere, which is giving stability to this rhythm. And also, you know, like if you want to get really progressive, which means that you are like, you know, you're like kind of in trance and you're just flying away with the sound, and you don't want to get like confronted with crazy rhythm changes. This is what you would want to do, you know, create patterns that repeat themselves all the time over and over again. Alright, so I would just like to conclude everything and make just sum it up real quick for you. So we are here in E Dorian with the chord progression that is just going up thirds in the beginning. You could come up with the consonant dissonant interval method that I've explained earlier, and with that chord progression, then he's not using minor or major chords in the first two chords, but he's suspending them. So he's using sus2 chords in this case, but you could also use sus4 chords. And he has a good mixture between sus chords and normal quality like major minor chords here. And the other thing is that at the very end he is emphasizing that special note in the Dorian scale, which is the C sharp, which is the major third of the A major chord, and he's just giving it to us in the last chord, which is making okay, now we're standard, and then we are going into this Dorian feel. So this is pretty cool. We have a triplet feel, and like the whole sound design is very moody and very progressive. There's a lot of repetition inside that. Alright, so this was the theoretical part of our first example, and I would like to go into a more practical part where we transfer all this knowledge. Let's go and create a MIDI clip here, and we will just use our drums here. We can mute all of this stuff. Oops. So we will mute all of our melodic content, and we'll just come up with some ideas here by ourselves using those methods we just learned. Cool, so let's call this bass here. Alright, so we're in our triplet grid. We have our basic drums going on, nothing too special here. As I said, everything is from PML, from different packs. Alright, so let's insert a diva right here, and I'll just use envelope 2 to control the filter opening, and we want to create like kind of this staccato style kind of a bass line. Alright, we are in E Dorian, we're just using the exact same scale as he did, and now let's load up an arpeggiator here and dial in those settings I just explained. Right, so now we're in our triplet grid. Now we can just create a MIDI clip by hitting Shift Command and M. We're in E Dorian, so let's start on our one chord in E Dorian, on our first minor chord here. So we have to solo this. So let's just open up the filter a little bit more here. Make this mono so there are no notes that are overlapping. Now we can increase decay and release a little bit. Alright, cool. We have to go down an octave. Oops, not folding here. Okay, so now I've told you about this method that I was using a lot in my recent productions, which is just moving within certain intervals inside your E minor Dorian scale within consonant intervals. So you use consonant intervals which are octave. Makes no sense because then you're on the same note again. Fifth, third, sixth, and fourth. And dissonant intervals are, I'm just repeating this, I made a longer video about this, are minor second, major second, minor seventh, major seventh, and of course the tritone. Alright, so we can go from the E, and I would say we can just, you know, go up a fifth, for example. And we're landing on our B. Okay, after that one we can go down, for example, a fifth from our E. and then we're landing on our A. Let's transpose this up so we have a smooth voice leading, and then we can just go up a third from our E, and then we're on our. So let's have a listen to this. Okay, so now we've set it our root notes here. Let's just duplicate this channel. Let's call this chords, solo it as well, and now we can deactivate this arpeggiator because now we're going to build up chords. So let's open up the Diva. Let's just increase the cutoff here a little bit. No envelope needed here, but we need sustain. And we also want to deactivate our mono mode here because we're going to dial in polyphonic material. Cool. So now let's decrease the release time here a little bit because we don't want to the chords to be releasing when they're changing. Otherwise they would be clashing maybe. Cool. So now we know that we can build chords upon those basic chords. We've just set it, and as I said in the earlier lessons, it's nice if you start with the bass line because the bass line dictates the chord that's going to be above it. So if you have an E in the bass line very low, doesn't really matter which notes you will dial in above it, it will be a E sus2 or E diminished or E major or whatever, A major over E, because E will, like lower notes, they just dictate the tonal center at that moment. Okay, cool. So let's use all of those notes. Let's just transpose them up an octave, make this a little bit quieter. And now I will just start to dial in fifths. So first we are in our E minor, so we have a B, then we're in our B minor after that. So with the right voice leading, this is like the fifth, but just transposed down an octave. So the fifth of the A is the E. Let's transpose it down an octave so we have a smoother voice leading, and the G, the fifth is the D. Let's also transpose this down an octave so we have a smoother voice leading also here. Okay, cool. So now we've got our like basic setup, root and fifth. So now we can go and either add a third or we use suspended chords, right? So E, we could use a E sus2 here as he did by dialing in just a F sharp here on top of it, because then we're directly in our open voicing. And this gives us instantly a Ben Böhmer feel. Here, down here sounds a little bit too muddy, so this is something you should watch out for. Okay, so now we're in our B minor. So now I'm thinking we could either leave this note here because it's the fifth of the B, or I mean we already have that F sharp down here, so that you should also watch out when you're doing like harmonic stuff that if you have in the first chord you have 3 different notes like E, B, F sharp, then you should have 3 different notes in the next chord as well, because otherwise it sounds maybe a little bit lush. Let's have a listen here. I don't know. So I think we can try different things here, and this is really fun. This is like how you can work through your chord progressions and just try different ingredients there, here and there. So the 4th degree of our B would be the E. So we could try to make like a B sus4 chord here at that point, and we'll just have a listen and figure out if we like the sound or if we want to go with a regular B minor chord and our second position. Okay, so I think it creates some tension, a little bit too much tension that wants to be resolved in that minor third. So we could, like shorten up this note and just go down to our minor third, which is the D of our B minor. I think this could work out. So this could be a way of dialing with this problem. Okay, so I think I will leave this one as it is. So next up we have our A chord. Now it's just an A chord, it hasn't got any quality to itself. You remember that we're in E Dorian, so now this is the interesting part of our composition right here. And as you can see with our voice leading is very smooth here. We're just going down a whole step, half step. So this should sound pretty good. So now this chord sounds totally out of place because we're missing we're missing our third here, and that's what I meant when I said you need to, like, you know, get all voices into your chord. Yeah, it's pretty standard. We could go. Maybe with doubling the fifth here in the last one. And just transpose this up here. Okay, but I think I'm happy the way this is here. We could like, you know, just drag this note here and like with this last voice. And if I'm talking about voice, like this is one voice, this is one voice, and this is one voice. You have to like watch it, you know, like if this is like one, you know, like one line. Imagine a line here, imagine a line here, and a line here. Yeah. So the thing that we could do, just to lead back into this first note here a little bit smoother, because now we have this jump of a fifth, which is okay, but maybe not ideal, is to change this note here. And where do you want to change it to? This is really completely up to you. You could go with a more dissonant interval. A more dissonant interval would be something that is not like fitting that well with the other notes that are inside a G major chord. Okay, of course, all in our diatonic scale. So if we have our G major chord here, we could go to our to the C sharp, and this would be a tritone, which shouldn't sound good. So this is like too far out. But if you go to the D, this is like the fifth. This would sound good. And if you go to the E, this could also sound good because it's the major sixth of our G major chord, and the major sixth is also a consonant interval. You could also, you know, like just do those steps a little bit smoother like that. So, you know, like this is like how you can like start adding more and more and more and more variation in the end. All right, so that could be like our basic chords here. So let's just duplicate this channel right here, solo it, and now we will do the plucky thing. Let's just go into Diva and set this up real quick. Let's close down the filter cutoff a little bit and dial in some more envelopes so we have more motion and more pluckiness in our sound, right? And I think we're good to go now. We can just close this Diva. And now we have our harmonic information here, which is pretty good. You know, now I can see which notes I can use at which time. This is like why I want to like duplicate just the channel. Okay, so let's shorten this up and make it rhythmical like that. And we have to enable our triplet grid. And I would recommend you to use 8th triplet grid, not the 16s, because I don't know, I have the feeling this is nothing that is a rule or something, but that they're like 16 triplet grids is hard. It's hardly grooving. It's not so nice. Okay, cool. So now we can start to add rhythmical variation. Let's just open this. Let's just, the envelope should open it up a little bit more. So I mean, this is like totally up to what kind of rhythm you dial in here. So if you go with the offbeat all the time, it will sound a little bit like Schlager, we say in Germany, like folk music. Hunke, 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 hunke. Like a little bit trashy maybe. Or if maybe we can go like that. Okay, so let's shorten this up. And we will just do the exact same rhythm right here. And here as well. Here and here as well. You can delete those ones, you don't need them. It's raining so hard here, you cannot believe. Okay, let's shorten this up. Cool. And you can already hear that if you put like this first one here on your on beat, like on the first beat, it sounds a little bit dumb. You know, it's just super obvious, like. If you syncopate it, so if you just put it an eighth note to the right, it gets more interesting. Now you could start adding delay and all that stuff. Okay, so I think that's it about this very first example, and this is how we're going to proceed through all of our 7 stages with our 7 different tracks here, right? I hope you could learn something from the style of Ben Böhmer. As I said, those are his ideas, and I don't wanna, you know, I'm just showing you what I think, what he did, and yeah, let's continue with the next example. Alright people, so welcome to the next example here, and this one is from Me and the Keine Musik crew, which I adore. I think they're making awesome music and they have an awesome style and everything is just great, and I was thinking about, can I recreate this track, or is it a little bit frontier or something to, you know, I don't know, expose the secrets. But I love the harmony and the whole production of Muje, and that's why we're going to have a look at that one now. So first, let's hear the cheesy version of Muje, which was kind of hard to make it super cheesy, but yeah, here you go. Alright, so those are like the basic chords here, and I've built this beat here, which is just, you know, this very characteristic tom groove he made. It's just with toms from my Organica pack here. Delay on top of it. If you wanna have a, you know, small class about how I created that, just let me know. Just a little bit top end here, a little bit pad in the background, and a kick. Alright, so this is like our drum groove, and I mean there's so much, there isn't so much happening in this whole track, but he's like building the chords very, very nicely. So I didn't program in the uncheesy chords because I like this one is going to be more focused on playing the piano, and I want to just give you a little bit of information on how you can like jam around like they did. I think that's a pretty cool thing that you can do. Yeah, so I'll just open up this virtual keyboard here one more time, and I will just, you know, play the chords here, and I will just tell you something about it, and then we're going to have a closer look at the harmony here. So basically we are in A minor here, and the first chord is an A minor 7 chord. Okay, so a 7th chord is just the regular minor chord of your, all in your diatonic scale here, right? Root note in the bass, 3rd, so tonic, 3rd, 5th note, and then you add, from the 5th you go up a 3rd, and you add the 7th note, which is, the 7th means the 7th note if you count up from the A here, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I didn't count the first one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, alright? So this is the A minor 7th chord. And you can build 7th chords on every degree in your scale. And what is interesting, I think he's playing with, he's just leaving that chord in his right hand where it is, and then he's changing the root note, and he's going down thirds here as well, and that's also like, this is also kind of using this principle that I made up with this going up or down in consonant intervals, right? Okay, so I will just jam a little bit, and then you can already sense like how he made this thing happen. I don't know if my sustain pedal is working, but well. Sorry, I will enable the virtual keyboard here so you can see what I'm doing. And then he's playing like, he's just changing like some of the notes inside his chords, but then coming back to the chord he's currently in. So. And now he's changing this root note here. And now again. F major 7. Okay, so you get the point, right? So I think that's a pretty interesting approach, because it's not very hard, and I will just explain to you why this is working so well. So if we have a look at this structure here, our A minor 7th chord, exactly in this voicing actually, so nothing too complicated. Now we are looking at this chord from the perspective of an A minor chord, right? We are thinking it's an A minor chord, but this chord can also be, it's the exact same chord but with a different bass note. It can also be a F7th 9th chord, because now those notes, they are still a A minor 7th chord here, right? We still have our A minor 7th, but we also, if we look at this from a perspective from an F major chord, then the A is the 3rd, the C is the 5th, the E is the 7th, and the G is the 9th chord, the 9th degree, the 9th note. So this is why I call this approach the jazz root method somehow, because you're just changing the root and then you can play variations on top of it. So I didn't got into and like played all the variations like he did exactly, because I think it's unnecessary for the demonstration here. But let's continue and see what's happening if we change the root from the F to the D. So this is, if you have a look at these upper notes now, we have the A, which is the 5th of the D. Then you have the C, which is the 7th of the D, because it's one note under the D. Then you have the E, which is one note, one whole tone above the D, equals the 9th. And then we have our last note here, which is the 11th, equals the 4th above our D, right? And this is creating a very distinctive and very nice jazzy sound. And it's working because those notes are very far apart from the root note, okay? And then he's making like small, like